This is Let's Talk with Hart Hagan, and today I'm joined by Blaine Tanner and Christy Collins. Christy and Elaine, how y'all doing?
Fine, thank you.
So we're going to talk about the Bullitt County pipeline, and we're also going to talk about Justin Noble. He's going to join us May 26th. And I was telling Elaine and Christy before we started the call that I just started looking up Justin on the videos today. He has an excellent article on Rolling Stone called America's Radioactive Secret. He's going to be joining us on May 26th to talk to us about the radioactivity within fossil fuels. And I've been saying that this is, maybe it's not the story of the century, but it's one of the biggest stories of the century in my humble frickin' opinion, because radioactivity is within fossil fuels, not all equally, some more than others, but you have uranium and radon and other things in oil and gas, and this is exposing us to health issues and causing health issues. All this is a big secret, and the EPA said, well, we can't regulate this or drive the industry out of business. And I'm like, yeah. So what do you all think? I mean, this is all fresh in my mind.
Having traveled around with Justin and the look on his face whenever he would see something that just was out of place, the stories that he would hear from the people that are living in these front lines had to be told. And the way that we're going to get these changes made, that we get someone in there that's going to regulate these things, is going to be because we're going to push those out that aren't doing their job, and we're going to put the right people in there. But Justin has a way of his environmental science background. He has a way of understanding it and putting it into layman's terms so that we can understand it. It is very helpful. And I think you'll be very pleased with the interview that you do with him.
Right. Well, one thing Justin is saying is that certain radioactive elements flow with air and some flow with water, but it's like they're always there. It's like radon. Christy's been talking about radon in relation to the Bullitt County pipeline. And it's like radon is a gas underground, and radon gets mixed in with natural gas, and then the natural gas, goes wherever it goes. And so, Christy, you've been talking about radon. Can you say anything about radon and the health issues related to it?
Radon is the second leading cancer causes of lung cancer that there is in America. Mm-hmm. Kentucky, with all the karst in the caves, has the highest radon content of anywhere else in the whole United States. That's something no one's taken into consideration on this.
So you're in Bullitt County, and we've been talking about this Bullitt County pipeline. We've been calling it the Jim Beam pipeline because it's for Jim Beam and nobody else. LG&E wants to build a pipeline for Jim Beam and nobody else. And you've been talking about how that it's karst. That karst is like caves, and caves are either cavities of air or they're pools or streams that through which water flows. And you have all these underground structures that make the ground brittle and not real suitable for a lot of heavy construction. And then you have natural gas and stuff flowing through it. So how does your expertise as a caver come into play? What have you found out? Didn't you get started with this because of being a caver and looking over geological maps and stuff?
Actually, I did. I was looking through the Kentucky Geo mobile app, and I was looking for caves closer to home. I'm currently on disability and different things, but the fact of that, I wanted to try to start doing back in caving. Caving has always been my thing. And I started looking at this, and I stumbled across it on ky.gov, and there's all these karst terrains that I put in karst ky.gov, and it popped up Bullitt County, and I was like, okay. And I started looking at it, I started reading it, and I started seeing all these things that they did not do, all these approvals they did not get. I used to work at Louisville Metro as a building inspector. I'm retired now. And all these provisions that should have been done on simple residential projects are not even being done on this level or to this degree. And I was like, something's wrong. I don't even understand how this could even be possibly to this point that it even is, with the stuff that they've either waived, disregarded, or not done.
Yeah, so Department of Water, EEC, that kind of thing. Talk about how, their relationship with LG&E and, are they getting all the approvals that need to be gotten? Is LG&E having to go through the hoops, having to jump through the hoops and getting the approvals that they need to get to build this pipeline?
No, they are not. I mean, for a residential project, if it was in any ways near in the same condition, just to even build a house, a bridge, a parking pad, whatever, they would still have to go through a GPP, a spring location, if there were springs in that area. They would have to go through a standard operating procedure, which has different environmental reviews under that. They would have to have watershed testing, different things. None of that is being done. And on the water quality permit, there's no watershed testing. How can you get a permit without any data at all of where you are currently standing and how the project's going to go further, and to compare that later on with data that you don't have? That doesn't even make sense.
So you're saying LG&E is not getting the approvals that they need. Why do you think that's happening that way?
um, whether it's political, whether it's Jim Beam, whether it's the money that they give back to the state, I don't know.
Favor.
I don't know.
It's about favor. It's about who you know. When I was dealing with a situation very similar in the mining in Eastern Kentucky, I ran up against the top of the wall, and I just kept bouncing back, and every turn that I would make, somebody would squelch whatever I was trying to accomplish. I was trying to get the message out. I was trying to get somebody to do what you had just asked them to do, and that was their job. And it was, you're talking Washington here, and again, the way you're going to change that is to change the picture in Washington. And we have an opportunity to do that. So.
Right. Well, another important thing that Christy uncovered this week in court documents, actually as a court doc, anyway, no reason to get bogged down in the details, but the EEC is saying, oh, there's nothing to see here. They're wanting help. Christy, help me out this. What happened with the court documents and the EEC? So you've got EEC, LG&E, Bernheim, and the other property owners. So what's going on there that's a little goofy?
We were told in the hearing last Friday that maybe Bernheim could possibly represent us and the LG&E represent the EEC. The EEC is supposed to be governing LG&E. How's LG&E going to partner with the EEC when they're supposed to be governing them if their hands aren't dirty?
Right. So Department of Water, the EEC is the Energy and Environment Cabinet. It's interesting that in Kentucky, the same cabinet that's supposed to be protecting the environment is also supposed to be regulating the energy, as if those aren't real, as if that doesn't make for a really confused mission. But the judge in this case is saying, oh, LG&E lawyers ought to speak for the Energy and Environment Cabinet. And you have this motion from the Energy and Environment Cabinet saying it's a motion for summary disposition, which means a motion for summary disposition or a motion for summary judgment means that there are no issues of material fact to be decided, like absolutely nothing to see here. We don't need to talk about whether or not LG&E is going through the proper hoops to get their permitting done. Am I on the right track with that?
Yes, but see, the thing was, there was a survey done of if you were going to do a pipeline, if you were going to do it and you had to do it, and there was no ifs, ands, or buts for Jim Beam to go down 245, Highway 245. But Jim Beam said they did not want it. They actually said that in the PSC document case. There's some excerpt in there in the little tiny writing down at the bottom that says they did not want their waters polluted. That's the reason why they've chosen this route. So it's okay to pollute the waters of everyone in this county, but not Jim Beam.
Right. So pollute everybody's drinking water, pollute the water that people have to bathe in, but don't pollute the water that we have to make bourbon with.
Right.
Sounds like they're putting profits over people.
Again,
So let me back up for a minute. Any listeners that are not intimately familiar with this or haven't heard about this or haven't heard very much about it, even if you've just seen the signs that say Save Bernheim, well, so what they're talking about is there's a pipeline in Bullitt County that the proposed pipeline is somewhere between 11 and 14 miles long. The pipeline has come about because Jim Beam, the maker of bourbon, wants energy to power a brand new operation that they've got going on. The pipeline costs $24 million, but Jim Beam doesn't want to pay for the pipeline. LG&E wants to build a pipeline for Jim Beam, but make the ratepayers pay for it. LG&E wants to build this pipeline because it's going to make them a profit, but Jim Beam doesn't have to pay any of the upfront capital costs. Meanwhile, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says that we have 12 years, actually now it's 10 years before we make serious reductions in our consumption of fossil fuels, or we won't have, or we'll do serious irreparable damage to the climate, which we've already done anyway. So so the pipeline does not make sense in terms of impact on climate. Pipeline doesn't make sense in terms of impact on water. Jim Beam says that, oh, we're doing this to decrease our carbon footprint. My ass, a natural gas pipeline doesn't decrease anybody's carbon footprint. Carbon footprint is code for we care about our impact on the climate. Nobody who cares about impact on the climate is going to be drilling for natural gas. Nobody who cares about impact on the climate is going to be releasing all kinds of methane into the atmosphere. Nobody who cares about climate is going to be doing all this construction of a pipeline. But we're reducing our carbon footprint. Meanwhile, LG&E says this is all in the public interest. You might say it's against the public. They want to say it's in the public interest so they can condemn people's land through eminent domain, pay them a song for their land, etc. So, guess you know how I feel about all this.
Well, their sister company went solar.
What? Yeah.
Maker's Mark went solar.
Mm-hmm.
Why can't them? They're all under the same umbrella of the same corporation. Why couldn't they go solar?
You'd think.
You would think.
Right.
Couple things that I see. And the first one is eminent domain, how they are walking across these people's properties. And a few years ago, the nuns fought the Bluegrass Pipeline. And eminent domain has one purpose, and that is to service the public. And if they are putting a pipeline in, then it should be something that is helping the state of Kentucky. Well, this isn't helping Kentucky, this is helping Jim Beam. And I think that exposing that, people talking about that would be very helpful. And this is one way of get those conversations started. So as long as we can do that. A couple other things that I looked and looking at some of the documents that have been shared, these documents that are out there, that I see this as a cookie cutter of how they worked with the coal issue that I dealt with and going through the EEC and all of the documents. My evidence was not allowed in. Christy, I'm seeing your evidence is not allowed in. Don't lose hope. I've been fighting this. I've been fighting the EEC for since 2012 formally. I've been fighting them a lot longer than that, but formally. And once the ruling came out from the hearing officer or the judge, then we appealed it in a circuit court. So we're in circuit court now. And in that appeal, the judge looked at it and saw something was real wrong here. I went after the state. I didn't go after the coal companies because the coal companies have a whole lot more money than I do. So I went after the state. They have a job to do. The job is to regulate and to make sure that SMACRA. I was under a SMACRA rule, which is when the federal government allowed the states to take over the regulating of mining. And so it wasn't just a state energy problem, it was a national problem and has yet to be resolved. So but don't lose hope. That judge came around and he says, okay, let's put these coal companies back in here. So he brought them back into the case. And then he allowed my evidence to come back into the case. We lost our attorney. He got sick, and we could no longer afford to hire someone else to walk into the middle of this case. So we've been able to, not practice law, but as a citizen to fight for what is right. So there's wins. Christy, I see your win. That's why we bonded so quickly, because there are things that we can do and things that we will do, and we will stop at nothing to hold them accountable.
We have no attorney at all. We have been doing this completely and totally by ourselves, based off different laws and codes that we have stayed up countless nights reading, researching, getting interpretations of, talking to friends that might be attorneys, getting, some sort of whatever, and putting this to them. And their thing was, well, maybe Bernheim can represent you. Well, Bernheim is a nonprofit. They have their own bylaws and all rights. I don't think Bernheim could even represent us. I mean, they might be able to help us. I mean, yes, we are working together and we will support each other because there is power in unity, but I don't know that they can. And we're doing this by ourselves.
I get that part. But you know what? We're still standing. And that's the most important thing that you can take from this is as long as there's a fight, and we're still standing for one reason, because we're right.
That's true.
Christy, do you think that, well, let me share how I see it. I mean, there are multiple paths that the pipeline could go. It could go through Bernheim, or it could be built but not through Bernheim, or it could not be built at all. Am I on the right track with it? It seems to me like Bernheim's attorneys can't represent the other landowners as long as their pipeline could take alternative paths.
It's not that, it's because they are a nonprofit, was it 401c3, 501c3, something like that. And they have their own bylaws because, that was something that we were thinking about together as a joint partnership. I do not know if they can in the EEC hearing. I honestly do not. I know that we will support Bernheim. So Bernheim, the last thing that they had sent out, was awesome. It was great. I mean, we all about like, we were all touched by it, but I don't know that they can legally do a representation of us based off the bylaws. If you look at it in a legal standpoint, I do not know that, but that was a suggestion, because LG&E is going to represent the EEC. And I'm like, why is LG&E going to represent the state? When I heard that, at that point, I just fell silent. I just got real quiet. I was so shocked. And in hindsight, we had discussed this. I mean, I really wished I would have said something, but I was just like, how is this even possible? I don't know. I mean, yeah, it would make it easier. I get that, because we're calling the EEC to do what they are expected to do based off their website, the provisions, all the codes, the laws that they put out there that they're supposed to do. But if their hands aren't dirty, then why is LG&E representing them?
How long have you been involved in this, Christy?
Oh, it's been a little over a year. I mean, I've been researching it, but as far as the petition and actually doing something about it, it's been a little over a year.
Mm-hmm. Well, it seems to me like the EEC, the Energy and Environment Cabinet, has there's a sworn duty somewhere. There's a duty somewhere. I mean, if there's not a duty, it's just important to know what it is. But generally speaking, the duty ought to be to protect the health and safety of the people, and probably economic, growth, which is usually BS. But economic, well-being is in there somewhere, but also the health and safety of the people of Kentucky, including the people of Bullitt County. And, what's up with, at what point is, I call him Governor Heartthrob because he's getting all this positive press from the COVID epidemic. Governor Beshear, when are you going to stick up for the health and safety of the people of Bullitt County instead of having, instead of approving a pipeline, look the other way while they build a pipeline that's going to trash the climate and it's going to expose people to all kinds of radioactive elements. Or let's talk about the 12 holes that they've drilled, 300-foot holes. They're doing that to survey for a pipeline, drilling 12 300-foot holes without permits, without any authorization. As far as I'm concerned, they're doing it in secret because they're doing it under completely false premises. Am I false pretenses? Am I right about that?
They said they were surveying on their plans, on their schematics that they had turned in, that the pipeline is supposed to be 6 foot. So technically, if you're surveying, I could see like maybe tripling down, kind of like as a cantilever effect. Anywhere you drill, you're supposed to have 3 times down for stability. So, you do 3 times 3 times 6, there's your math. Not 300 feet. The cantilever effect doesn't even come in to that proposal when it comes to that. So at 300 feet, they were specifically looking for things. And they even hit what they called sweet gas, which is supposed to be like the perfect type of gas. And because there's sweet gas and there's sour gas. Sour gas has the impurities, the sweet gas, and that was the one that was on Vanessa's and the other farmer's pipe property line right there. And they hit that, they just let that blow for days. The carcinogenics, everything else. And when you hit that in a karst terrain and air pockets, which is calling sinkholes in other people's lands, they're not in the proposed pipeline path, which I've been saying all along. This is not going to stay just in this like little path on these little properties where they got easement agreements or not. It's going to affect other places. And now other landowners are now starting to see that. And they were even drilling this past December. We brought that up in one of our hearings. And of course, LG&E was like, oh, that's not admissible. But when you hit groundwater and you're drilling with that saline and other chemical solution, what are you putting in the groundwater? If you have no water quality test and you're going for a water quality permit and we have no data of that, and we have no watersheds, I guess that's perfect to drill in because you don't know at what point you're at for purity or not.
Why are they drilling?
They say it's for surveying, hypothetically. You should not be surveying to those depths at all, based off the schematic. There's no engineer way.
I've heard that they're telling some people that, oh, we're gonna hit oil and gas and you're gonna get the royal or something to that effect. They act like they're drilling for extraction and whispering in people's ears, acting like they're gonna get rich off of extraction, but then there's storage. It seems like storage is the most likely. I mean, whatever the reasons there are for drilling these holes, they've admitted to drilling the holes, but they're not saying why.
They're not saying where, they're not saying why. There was a document out there on ky.gov. We were hacked at one point, so that's missing from my emails, but it did say natural gas storage. I have been told by other people, no, if they hit sweet gas, especially at those depths, it will be fracking. It might be 5 years, 10 years. They're not going to tell you right now. They're hoping that, maybe you'll forget about it and they might later. So, I mean, there's a possibility of that. There's a possibility of storage. There's a possibility of that. They've said now that they're just bore hose for clean out. Well, even bore hose for clean out, when you do your testing monthly, still has the emissions in it. So you're still putting emissions and carcinogenics and poisons back into a karst system with groundwater, which you don't have any data for.
So these oils and gases are in the ground. We would have done well to never go into fossil fuels. It wasn't strictly needed. We could have figured out other ways to develop. They've been very harmful. But now that we know what's in them and how harmful they are, it's like every time we drill and extract oil and gas, we're extracting carcinogens and volatile organic compounds, which are the cause of so many different diseases. And then in Kentucky karst, so they want to build this pipeline over 7 different streams and waterways, all of which flow into the Salt River, which in turn flows into the Ohio River. So they want to build this pipeline over 7 different streams and waterways and all of the underground streams in between.
And some of the karst, like when I was doing the GeoMobile, trying to get different maps and data and pinpoints of the geology for the uranium and the different things, and whether it was a coal field or not, for the different, because I think it's like Divinian and it's like some other, stuff. I'm not a geologist,
right?
But that is a fascination of mine. So looking at all these maps, showing the karst, there is even LiDAR on this. There is even survey reports from LG&E's own surveyors they have not turned into the EEC stating intense karst terrain that the EEC is just dismissing because they never got the documentation of it. And the thing is, this is survey reports between parcels of lands for different land individuals their own third-party surveyor is, attesting to. That's not even being looked at because they're saying, oh, that's not part of it.
So it seems that if you have a pipeline going over karst terrain, I mean, how do pipelines catch on fire to begin with? And I've heard it would seem to me like if it catches on fire where there's a spark, but not 3 miles up or 3 miles back, but can it explode at a place different from where it catches fire, or how does that work?
You're on unstable. Go ahead, Elaine.
I might be able to help with that. When we were looking at running frac lines under the Ohio River, I was told by an engineer that, and also by the Department of Oil and Gas in Ohio, that if there's an explosion, say those lines got too close that are running under the river, there will not be an explosion under the river. It will be back at the wellhead. What I'm seeing in several pipelines explosions that I've worked with over the years or have reported on is there's a lot of times it's a slip or a slide, a lightning can strike, or, there's many reasons, but they're putting these pipelines in areas that are not suitable. And when you go into these mountainous areas and you try to put a pipeline, that's a problem. But in the karst, that's a whole nother issue. They have no idea of what they're dealing with.
With the unstable soils of this, with the fact they're using this for groundwater, because it's in a FEMA area on top of it.
We've got about 3 or 4 minutes left.
It's running right next to oil lines.
The Midland.
It's running next to oil lines. That's a propellant for fire.
I would like to kind of step back a minute, and you ask about, the state's supposed to take care of this. Well, if you look at your 14th constitutional amendment, that's exactly what it says, that when the state fails, that the federal government is supposed to take care of us. And that has failed us too. So we are screwed. Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, sometimes I just want to point out that sometimes we get in the weeds with politics. Sometimes I just want to point out our Metro Council, for example, you're not doing anything close to their job. They're just opening up the city for multinational corporations and absentee investors to have their way with all of our resources. And it's like, what do you spend your time doing? And the state, what do they spend their time doing? And the Energy and Environment Cabinet, I mean, Governor Beshear, you can use your executive authority to make your department do what it's supposed to do and get the applicable permits. But instead, the Energy and Environment Cabinet is trying to tell the court that there's nothing to see here. LG&E does not need any more permits for this truckload of reasons.
Nationwide Permit 12 has a purpose. And if the guidelines that were set to put that in motion were being followed, we wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation.
Not only that with the Nation Permit 12, but we're looking at the PSC, which is the 192.615 of the Federal Register, the CFR, that if there's a shelter in place and there's no fire hydrants, and there should be, there's a lot of this area that does not have fire hydrants and does not have the friction. They have too much friction loss to even be able to do anything with if something was to go wrong with the fire here because of the karst terrain and the unstable soils.
When we've seen these pipelines explosions happen in other parts of the country, there are no plans. They sit back and they watch and they bring in the experts, which might be on the other side of the country. So this just burns until they can figure things out. We saw that in Belmont County, Ohio, a couple years back, and it was 22 days that pipeline, or that was actually a wellhead that exploded on that one.
Christy and Elaine, I wish we could talk longer, but we're just about out of time. Do you want to leave us with some final thoughts?
I don't know what else to say.
Christy.
My final thought is that we're going to continue this conversation. It's fun on the one hand. On the other hand, we're dealing with some pretty weighty issues, but we're going to keep talking about this because I, for one, had never heard all of this if I had relied on some organizations that are going to remain nameless. But we're going to keep talking about it, and we're going to see what can be done and expose what needs to be exposed. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.